Did you know that for every £1 that a man in finance is paid, a woman is said to be paid just 60% or 60 pence, basically? I don't know if that's still the most up to date statistic and if that's still true or relevant, but I've actually brought in with me somebody who is going to be giving us some insight into the gender pay gap because this is really important to them. Now, the person I have brought on the call for you today is a money honey in the financial services industry. I know her because she works for a lender who was quite similar to a lender that I used to work for. And I'm very, very excited to bring her on the show. You may have seen her, you may not have seen her before. Her name, her beautiful name, face, soul, and everything I've ever met about this girl is just total money honey vibes. Her name is Hannah Odes. She is a business development manager for UTB, so United Trust Bank. So actually her main role is insight sales manager. She used to be an insight sales manager. So Hannah's going to tell us all about her career within UTB. She did start out in a fintech platform as well, so she's got a lot of experience in the industry. She got a promotion last year in March, so this will be great to hear how women are progressing in the financial services space, how they're developing their careers, and Hannah's here to shed a light on that in particular. So I'm very, very excited to bring her on the show. She's going to be touching on topics like the gender pay gap. So if this is a show for you, please stay tuned, keep listening, and stay tuned for Hannah.
Hello.
Hello there. How are you?
Very grateful it's Friday, actually. Thank you.
Oh,
how are you?
Yes, very good. Thank you. I do appreciate you taking the time on a Friday. I always record my podcasts on a Friday and then they come out every Friday, the shows. So thank you for taking today out for me. I know we're only together for half an hour, but I really want to share as many insights from your experience as possible. First of all, just in case I've got your intro completely wrong, because you've had a few roles, I get the sense that I might have introduced you and your role incorrectly. Please give us all an intro as to where you work, what you do, and what your current role is, because I know you've changed recently.
Oh, yeah, cool. Thank you. So at the moment, I'm the corporate account manager at United Trust Bank. And that means I look after all the networks and clubs from sort of like a UK distribution standpoint. So, yeah.
Okay, amazing. Right, got it. Okay, right. I get where you are now. So was this your promotion then? Is this the role you moved into in March?
Yeah, so it's March a year ago. So I started off my journey at UTB as key accounts. Okay. So I looked after some packages and larger brokers. And then last year I got the opportunity to sort of change the role into a bit more like strategic planning, a bit of marketing, some development stuff, and to start to look at how we could grow the bank's presence in the sort of mainstream market. I know we're a specialist lender, but UTB started their journey in seconds. So it's been a challenge to sort of move into the mainstream residential market, the first charge world, and then more recently buy to let. So all good stuff.
Amazing. Brilliant. Yes, I once did apply for a job at UTB, this was ages ago. Yeah, I ended up working for a different specialist lender. I just think the timing, like I think I got the interview first at the other one, and then I was just, it just ended up working out that way. But yeah, I see you actually entered this role around 2020, which is about the time that I exited my last lender. Is that right? You entered at 20?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, quick maths, come on.
Yes, 2020, which means, did you start pre or post pandemic?
It's kind of during. I started in November 2020.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, yeah, right in the thick of it. You're right. So, listen, I really want to just crack on with the chat we were having offline. Sometimes our best conversations are actually happening when the mic isn't on and you're like, oh, I want to grab that. But you really wanted to shed a light on So shine a light on some of these statistics around the gender pay gap. Now, I gave a statistic at the beginning, which was, for every £1 that a man is paid, women are paid 60 pence. What have you seen from your research and your experience?
Yeah, so I've read a few different reports, and I want to focus specifically on our area of the industry because there's a lot of divergence still within the housing sector. So I read, and this is from Google, so just
It's
letting you know
true.
that it may not be 100% correct, but this is what I've read. That HSBC reported in 2022 that men were getting paid 45% more than women. And okay, when you take that fact on the chin, it's like, oh, that's alarming. But actually, I think we need to delve deeper and think about why that is, and whether it's to do with equal opportunities or are people seeing role models in that space. So there's probably quite a lot into why that statistic is. So something else that I read that came out this year in March, it was by Deloitte actually, said that women in financial services held 21% of board seats, 19% of C-suite roles, and only 5% of CEO positions. And that is probably where this disparity comes from. One CEO probably gets paid the same as half of the telephony team, for example.
Wow.
So if there are not equal opportunities or this disparity in the seniority of the women within the business, then naturally that's going to lead to such a huge divergence or gender pay gap. I think something I read completely ages ago, it was saying about which countries in the world do have a gender pay gap. And the thing I read said only 2 countries didn't. One was Denmark, and that was because when somebody has a baby, the maternal and paternal, or whatever the setup is, the couple both have equal time off, and it's obligatory, so they have to. So that meant there's no gender pay gap. And the other place was Rwanda, and that was because of what happened in 1994 and the mass genocide of 60% of the men. So females were taking those jobs, and therefore there is no gender pay gap there. But for everywhere else, there's still a significant gap.
Wow, that is such an interesting report that you've just shared there. I've never even heard of that one at all, that statistic of the 2 countries that don't have a gender pay gap. I would have guessed Denmark for sure. I do love everything about that country, actually. From what I've heard, I've only been to in that part of the world, I've only been to Copenhagen, and it was phenomenal city. And I heard about this co-parenting or shared parental leave because one of my neighbors has actually done it. So they both took 6 months off at the same time. So the father and the mother. And I was like, wow, that's such a good idea, because when one slept, not even just for the money, but when one slept, the other looked after the baby, and then they took it in turns, and they had time to themselves as well. So that's a top tip that I've kept in my back pocket just in case I need it. So what would you have? What would you do about it, Hannah? How would you resolve this gender pay gap?
I think it's so interesting because the more we talk about it, the more I think about single parent families and childcare and all of those things that come from, I suppose, our civilization or how we do it in the UK. And I think the first thing I would do would put childcare as an equal responsibility for both parents. And in having that, it might reduce the pay gap, because I think a lot of it is probably because if you employ a young female of a certain age, you have to factor in that maternity leave is highly likely. And I think there are so many circumstances where that's not the case. But funnily enough, a previous partner of mine, her dad ran a business, and he said there's no way he would employ a young woman if there was an opportunity to have a guy, because he doesn't want to have to foot the cost of her having a baby. And I said to him at the time, I was like, the funny thing is you have 2 daughters, and one of them is in a same-sex relationship with another girl. So only one of us would be having a baby and the other one would be working. But I would lose out on the opportunity if I didn't have the child because you'd put me in that category. It caused an eruption at the table. I was like,
yeah, I bet.
I can't even believe you've got daughters. How can you say this?
I mean, do you know what? That is such a great point that you've just raised there. And I hope you don't mind me bringing the conversation into that space. So, you have a same-sex partner.
Yeah.
And you've just highlighted how one of you is going to get treated well, you're both going to get treated unfairly because you're a woman, but only one of you is actually going to have the baby, potentially. Maybe you can both have it, you can both have one each. I don't know what the plan is, but
I don't need that many hormones in the house in one go.
I'm in at different times, Anna. Gosh. That is crazy. But yeah, but it's just the fact that, like you've just said, because maternity leave is more common for women, it means that they get an unfair treatment when applying for a job, because it's automatically assumes that they're likely to go on maternity, when actually, whether they're in a same-sex partnership or they're in a with a male partner, how does the employer know that actually it's the female applying that wants to go on maternity? Maybe they've already discussed that actually she's never going to go on maternity and it's going to be the father that's going to do it. So you can't have that conversation at the interview, though.
Or even if they can have kids. Because some people can't even have kids, and they're automatically going to be treated in this way, and that might not even be an option.
That is so true. That is so, so true. Wow, that is a lot to think about there. So we've still got, clearly we've still got an issue of gender pay gap here in the UK. Yeah. And that is one of the most developed countries out there. So I don't know how that is still happening. But yeah, we've still got this unfair treatment or judgment passed on to applicants who, are female and perhaps are considered, to be, a liability because they're not going to be around and they need to go and have a baby. Very, very frustrating. Has that held you back, Hannah? Have you felt unfair treatment at all? Not obviously you're working for one of my favorite lenders out there. You're not speaking as part of the lender. You're speaking as yourself when you were navigating through financial services. Did you ever feel any stereotypes, or do you feel completely equal and fair?
I think, especially in my current role, I think they've been super accommodating. Like, UTB are so hot on culture, D&I. There's like multiple committees. We have a calendar. I sit on the D&I committee. We have a calendar where we get together every 2 weeks and we try to talk about every possible scenario or obstacle or something that people may experience. So we've got like a big group of people that put ideas together, and they're so open to hearing new things. So I recently did a podcast on pinkwashing and the LGBTQ community, and how policy states or dictates how sort of the mat leave works in that situation. And so I spoke to UTB about it, and I said, what happens if my partner and I have a baby? Well, I have paternity leave. Like, I'm not
Hannah, to interrupt.
Yeah.
Anna, I'm very sorry. You've cut up.
My back.
Sorry. Apologies for the recording. Hannah, yeah, you were cutting out a bit there. It was a little bit robotic. So I got up to, you've got an LG. Yeah, it was a little bit cutting out. So sorry, I think you might be back now. So you have a committee at UTB and you meet every 2 weeks. Yes. So carry on. Yeah. Sorry. Tell us about that.
So it's the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And we try to think about or cover off every possible scenario or situation. And we plot it in a calendar throughout the year. So we have articles. The bank have given us a budget for guest speakers. They put things up in the kitchen, like there's notes, flyers, emails about all different scenarios. And so I was saying recently I was invited on a podcast to talk about pinkwashing and the LGBTQI community. And I asked the bank, where does it sit if we end up having a baby? What, I get paternity leave? Like, I am not a dad or a man for that matter. How would I do? And they were so good. And I've gone through the policy, and I think it covers off as many different combinations of couples or parental setups you could get. So on one side, it's super inclusive, but it's still probably the standard term of 2 weeks full paid, and there's some flexibility with additional time. But I think it's more of like something that the government should look at, rather than companies and like their own specific structure. It should be standardized for everybody, because I know for certain companies like Google, they have a super progressive parental leave agreement. So it's like, yeah, I think the government should get involved, basically.
That's really interesting. Yeah, no, you're right, Hannah. I think it's absolutely wonderful to hear what your lender, what your current employer has done to be able to accommodate for same-sex partners who have a different setup, who have a completely different philosophy to how they're going to be parents. Something they wouldn't have considered in the past because maybe it hadn't come up, right? Particularly because in financial services, it's been predominantly a male trade, right? So they've only ever seen traditional couples, man and woman, and it's mainly the man who's at work. But obviously women have there's so many more women in financial services, and we're trying to grow that industry now. But we're still having the conversation about men and women. I'm in groups where we're talking about non-binary, LGBTQ plus community. And it's like, in financial services, guys, we're still stuck on talking about the equality between men and women. That is like old news now. Like, we're all up talking about we're just not even up to date with the conversation. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what are we going to do in 10 years time when actually we're really far behind on this non-binary conversation that we still haven't actually introduced into the financial services space? And this month I've attended a training on, because I do a lot of public speaking or speak to a diverse range of people. And sometimes in the room, you assume, when you address the audience, you're like, ladies and gentlemen, actually, no. Not everyone in the audience is a lady or a gentleman, right? So I've had to get some training on making sure that my language is more versatile and more accepting of all people. So I thought I was accepting of all people without passing judgment, but sometimes your language slips into, automatically addressing someone as she or him, when actually I haven't even asked if they identify as something different. So that's all yet to come in the financial services space. And it sounds like your employer is already addressing that openly with you, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, no, I think we have had conversations. We've been asked to fill in our pronouns and how we identify, how we would like to be addressed. The bank gives us regular surveys to say, what could they do better? Are there any areas you could suggest, or things you've heard from other places that they could implement? But I think it's not to be honest, I think this industry is very far behind, but it's also in wider life. I've sort of come across this more recently. So I play football in an inclusive league. So for the most part, it's women's football. Okay. But more recently, there have been more mixed teams with people that identify in different ways and are in different steps of their journey from transitioning, or maybe they just identify as non-binary. And so now in football, before each match, we have to go around and do our pronouns and our names and an introduction as a respect thing. And I think it's really, it's a really growing topic of discussion, particularly in sport, about how we are inclusive for people that identify in a different way or are transitioning, and what place they have in sort of the sporting arena. And I think it's something that really does need to be brought into our industry. That we're, as you said, we're still stuck on men and women and challenges to do with racism, homophobia, and yet they are crucial, critical conversation points. But I don't think I've really heard much of anybody talking about gender, and even how we have to say Miss, Mr, Ms., you know, when you're filling
Yeah.
out forms, like,
Yeah.
what relevance does that have? What does it
Yeah.
matter? It doesn't
Yeah.
make any difference. It's a person. So it's either a
Yeah,
man or a
exactly.
crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. It has no bearing on my application because, if I'm applying for a mortgage, I don't know, like, how does that mean anything to the application? I get obviously age does and things like that, but yeah, it doesn't matter who I identify as. But obviously places are changing their forms, to suit a more diverse audience. And so yeah, I just wanted to say that I am bringing that into the space. So the Money Honey Show will have a special speaker coming on board, and they trained me, and I will bring them onto the show at some point. I can't wait. I can't disclose their name or anything just yet, but they are going to be bringing a conversation to the show about how we can start to embrace that in the workplace, in financial services, but also as an applicant, as a lender, or as a property investor, like whatever, in whatever category, as an employer, all of it. So we are going to open that channel and open that. But I love this football team of yours. Like, that sounds so wicked. If you where do you play? Where would we see you?
So we play in East London in Hackney. And it's
Nice.
called the Super 5 League. So it's like a five-a-side, and it's grassroots football. So I'm not going to pretend I'm very good, because I'm not. But it's for sort of, I guess, the reason it was so important and the reason it's got such a huge following is because I think a lot of people, when they move to London, for example, it can be quite a lonely place to begin with. And I moved here in lockdown, so I really had no chance. I moved to a house where I'd never met anyone, in a place I'd never been, to do a job I'd never done. And it was quite challenging, especially in lockdown, to start to meet new people organically. So I think it provides a sense of community for women who may not have had previous sporting experience, who can come along to something that's every week with like-minded people, and it's so diverse. Oh my goodness, there are teams with like such a mixture of people, which actually brings me on to another topic, which was the women's Euros team. That was so crazy to see. The whole team was white with blonde hair.
Which team?
You know, the England Lionesses.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I thought that does not represent women's football, because at this grassroots football league that I play at, I've never seen more diversity in one place where there are 4 pitches. Literally, you could be anywhere at any time.
Yeah.
And I think
I think that's what I'm trying to say. Even in sports as well as financial services, we're still kind of like trying to get the men and women situation right. And so the best that the Lionesses put together was white blonde women who I don't even identify as, right? Like, I don't even identify in that category. But that's why, because our we've got this tunnel vision between, okay, men's football, women's football. So they didn't even put into the layer women diversity football. Do you see what I mean? It's like, it's just having that attention to detail of, actually, let's just skip the whole men and women conversation, because we should have done that years ago. Let's just now really be up to date and current with what's going on. And so, we're saying this, we should be current, we should be up to date. So how do we address it? What should we do about it? What actionable step, as we close the show, Hannah, what would you say for lenders who are listening to this, applicants, people who want to get into financial services, or even just your peers and colleagues? Like, what call to action could we give people to help everybody contribute to the change? We all have to contribute to the change. So what could we do?
So I guess there's like 2 things that immediately came to thought. And no, I haven't thought this through in great detail.
So, no, I've just asked you it on the spot, so apologies. But I think it'd be great to just know your gut reaction.
So the 2 things I'd implement would, one, be remove the naming conventions of Miss, Mr, whatever. Get rid of those for a start. And second of all, when you're looking at recruitment, employment, reviews, promotions, all of those things, like, maybe start to assess people on a meritocratic basis. So I get that time in the industry is one thing, and start to have lots of different measurements so that everybody is measured comparatively, and it's based on their skill set, their time in the industry, what they've done, how they've hit their targets, and then remove this gender pay gap. Because if the gender pay gap is a result of there not being equal opportunities or as many senior females, then we need to work on promotions and equality and presenting role models to encourage younger people and a new wave of people to get involved in the industry. But if it's to do with a gender pay gap between two people that have the same level of job, we need to rip that up and review what value they're adding, how much income they're bringing in, how they treat their customers, how, even empathetic they are as a manager. Those things make such a huge difference to the workforce. And just because they're not necessarily tangible on a piece of paper, they shouldn't be overlooked to the value that they bring to a business and the diversity of the team.
Yes, I absolutely love that, Hannah. So those are Hannah's top tips. Mine to contribute to that and bringing this conversation not to a close. We are opening the conversation. So we are interested in your thoughts. We are interested in your comments. We are interested in your questions. If you have questions when this show is released, please drop a comment either on Spotify or on the YouTube channel or on LinkedIn. I know Hannah and I will be sharing it, but any of your questions are welcome and suggestions as well. But my suggestion as a final thought would be, if you are an employer, I would urge you, like I did, to take responsibility to learn just simply from someone in that space, from someone in that environment who can really educate you on how they feel, right? How this diverse group of people feel unidentified and how you can help them feel more included. Listen to them, speak to them, really just have a conversation with anybody who either is in your personal network or your professional network, and just say, look, I really want to learn, what are we doing that is not purposely excluding you, but because of what we're doing, it makes you feel excluded. How can we help you feel more included? I would urge every single employer, whether senior or middle management, to get this level of training and then to pass that down to the rest of the business and to the rest of the employees, because we should respect each other as individuals as well. And maybe we just haven't been exposed to that level of training before. So we really do need to have that conversation in-house as well. So Hannah, you've been an absolute pleasure on the show. Like as always, I never feel like half an hour is enough, but it's a great intro and a flavor to get to know a little bit about the world of Hannah. So there you have it. Brilliant account manager, excellent leader, apparently not too shabby football player. Okay, well that will be the proofs in the pudding, Hannah. I'm gonna do my best to come and watch, actually. So if we want to find you, please tell the audience, where can we find you if we want to connect with you and follow your journey?
So the best place would probably be LinkedIn. My name is Hannah Oades. That's Oades. But when you do find me, it will be Hannah O, and there's no picture until I accept. So don't be alarmed. It is the correct account.
It's the real Hannah, everyone. This avatar is the real Hannah. But look, I will include the links in the show notes so that you are not mistaken who to connect with. But it's been a pleasure, Hannah. Thank you so much for being a money honey.
Thank you for having me, and have a wonderful afternoon, everybody listening.
And you, my darling. Take care.
Bye-bye.